There's a saying that goes, "You're only as happy as your least happy kid." And it's so true. When our child is struggling, it affects us so deeply, and this doesn't stop when they become teens or young adults. As we're entering graduation season, college graduates are facing a really tough job market. Many of these kids have never had to struggle with the constant rejection that goes with a job search. How do we as parents best support our kids when they go through tough challenges like this? In today's episode, we'll be exploring how resilience coaching can empower our kids, young and old, with tools to help them thrive in the next chapter of their lives. Personally, I'm hoping to pick up a few tips for myself. 48-year-olds need resilience training too. I'm Betty Wang, the host of Betty's Smart Friends. I'm a certified financial planner who helps women be more empowered and feel less alone when it comes to their money. We're so lucky to have Jennifer Andrews as our guest today. Jen is the founder and youth resilience coach at Treppy Coaching. Jen's mission is to support teens and young adults in identifying personal strengths, setting realistic goals, and developing problem-solving skills. Jen's career is dedicated to helping others empower themselves. Please welcome Jen Andrews to the podcast. Yay! Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, could you explain to us what exactly resilience coaching is? I think it's a new term for me.
Yeah, it's a new term. It was a new term for me too. Um, so resilience coaching is essentially the process of getting clear on your values, understanding where you're at and where you want to go. And the word resilience specifically is in there because I think it really means that you've been challenged with something. And it doesn't have to put you in dysfunction, but that you're struggling to understand yourself or having a hard time making decisions or move forward. And so coaching is coaching is the process of empowering you to walk through that.
And how is that different than therapy? Because it
Yeah,
sounds,
I get that
yeah.
question a lot. Right. So therapy, whether you're with a therapist or you're with a psychologist, they work with people that are in dysfunction. So I like to think of that as you're kind of frozen within yourself, whether it's an anxiety, in an issue with a person, your environment, something, and you're unable, you're very stuck, and whether it can also be due to mental health issues, um, or something more transient, but you're in dysfunction and not moving forward. The coaching process begins when you have a handle on something like that and you are not in dysfunction. You are a functioning person. You are living your life out functioning. You don't feel frozen, but you need help moving forward with some strategies.
Can you give us some examples, or like what kind of challenges do folks come to you for?
Yeah. So I work with a range of, I literally say anything and everything. So, you know, I work with kids that have ADHD. I work with adults that have ADHD. I work with parents that are having trouble parenting, anxiety, social um, difficulties with whether it's teens or young adults, understanding how to make big life choices, right? Teens are having a hard time understanding what to do after high school. Not everyone wants to go to college, or maybe you're having a hard time even just getting yourself organized to apply to college. Finding a job. You could be, having gone to a wonderful, amazing school, and you're finding yourself entering this very bumpy job market and not sure which way to turn. So it really can, there's really no end to what goals we can set. But a lot of people start out thinking they need one thing, and we end up targeting a completely different area.
So you and I have talked about personally the differences in how we grew up and how really we didn't get much support in these life decisions. It was very much figure it out. That's part of growing up. Maybe we had a school counselor. I think my test, I remember this, my aptitude test said that I should be a mortician. I mean, that was like, yeah, that was awesome.
That would have worked well.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, me as a total scaredy cat. No. So, you know, could you talk about how maybe that's made our generation a little more open to helping our kids with their decisions coming up? I mean, I could sort of see the boomers or our parents saying, what is this resilience coaching? This sounds like you've babied your kids too much."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that generation to me, and my experience, and you and I do talk about this a lot, they were not super reflective. At least maybe they are now in their older years, but back then there wasn't a lot of self-reflection. And I think my theory is that maybe it led our generation to be a little more right introspective. Um, and wanting more support than what we got, right? And then turning to this generation behind us, our children, and saying, what can I do more to help you? I wasn't helped very much, right? Certainly that it wasn't coming from an evil place of not wanting to help us, but what more can we do? And I think coaching evolved out of that. It's not that these kids are in dysfunction and need therapy per se. There might not be mental health issues. They might just be having a bump in the road that, right? And how can we take where we are and support them and empower them to move forward? And it's more about gaining a skill set than it is treating a disease, a mental health disease, right?
And do you feel like our kids coming through traditional schooling, they don't have these skills for whatever reason?
I think there's just so much more expected of them. I mean, even yesterday, for my own child, yesterday, the amount of tests with his SAT, trying to find a job, getting ready for prom. I mean, the social, having to go here, this tutor, that tutor. I didn't know how he got through his day. I mean, and I know it's like, I'm sure we did this, right, to some degree, but I just think that coupled with social media, coupled with the level of expectations of performance, right? That, it's just different than what we had, right? And that it's projected for everyone to see, right? There's no privacy anymore, right? It's not that you could just go to school and have your life and kind of be it. It's projected to everybody. So this level of pressure is something our generation did not have, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But I feel so bad for them, right? I mean, they can't get away with anything. Um, and they're just always in the spotlight or always trying to keep up. And it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot for people that don't have mental health issues, right? So it's just a lot of stressors, a lot of pressure. And I feel my job is just to continue to empower them to find strategies that work so they can get through not just this one that they're coming to me for, but the next one, the next hurdle, right? That's where resilience comes in, right? So that's life. They're gonna
Right.
keep getting knocked down, right? Or setback, or they didn't get a scholarship, they didn't get into this school, this person broke up with them. How do we rebound? How do we come back, right? And move forward.
Yeah. How do we do that?
Well,
That would be great to know.
right,
Yeah.
right. I like so in coaching, in general, I can just go through how work with my clients,
Yeah,
right?
that would be
So,
great.
yeah. So, when they come to me, I always do a consultation because I think meeting a coach and making sure you connect to somebody is just like any therapist, even really, right? Or teacher, or tutor. It's the same thing. You got to have a connection, right? And a lot of people don't understand what the process of coaching is. So I go ahead and I explain that and really make them understand they are in control of this process. I'm really not leading, right? This process is them leading themselves. I'm just kind of the rails, and if I do my job right, they actually don't need me later on, right? Because I've worked with them on strategies that they feel empowered with to use it later, right? So we go through this consultation, and if they agree to sign up, we have an initial session, and we go through some what I call surveys, and we check on their well-being, which are questions like how's your self-awareness, right? How's your safety level? How's your time management? How are your relationships with others, right? And we kind of go through this today picture of themselves. And then I go through another survey with them that talks about what do you value? You're out in the world. What do you value in yourself? What do you value in others, right? Is it loyalty? Is it honesty, right? Is it trustworthiness? And these are words that they know, but a lot of people don't use this vocabulary. And this includes adults and teens and young adults that I work with. Emotional vocabulary is not used a lot. And they're basic words we use. Remember that chart in like kindergarten that had all the faces on it,
Yeah.
right? It's like we can see it there, but we don't employ it. And so we work a lot on identifying some of the emotions and some of the places they're at and those values. And then we combine those two. Where are you at? And what are your values? And how can we create goals based on those, right? What do we really need to work at? Sometimes they come in and they'll say, well, I have ADHD and I'm doing horrible in school. And they, the parents and the child think, okay, we're gonna talk about some strategies. And of course we do. But ultimately, what always comes out is an emotional response based on what they're trying to attain, right? What the goal is, right? How it's making them feel. And if you can kind of get learning through some strategies about how to identify that emotion, understand it, bring it to a level of awareness, and now you're at kind of ground zero. What are some strategies that you've used in the past? How can we get to that goal over there? And then let's talk about ways to implement that in your daily life, and then that's kind of closes out a session. And then when we come back the next session, they give me a check-in. Well, how did that strategy go this week? What did you do? What did you experience? Was it scary to implement it? Did you feel confident in it? And we kind of break that down and then say, all right, should we keep working on this? Or do you feel like you have a handle? They can choose another goal that we've set. They can keep going. And it just keeps going like that. A lot of questions of, tell me more about how you experience this now. Tell me how you've experienced it in the past. And tell me, what do you want for it in the future? Right? And we're doing this present, past, future look backs, look forwards, so that they can understand that there's a difference in each of these stages, right? But always, how do we move forward?
What age? I mean, it seems like everybody should go through something like this, right? Like,
I believe in it. I think
what
so.
age is like ideal? Is there an ideal age to? I mean, obviously, I think our values and our emotional space changes as we age, especially with teens and young adults, right? This is their formative years, but
Yeah.
there's still a base there to work with where they could at least start building the blocks earlier.
Yeah. Totally. And I think it's going to depend on the kid. I've worked with a 13-year-old who was extremely self-aware and had amazing emotional vocabulary, right? Really could express herself. And then I've worked with 30 and 50-year-olds that have no idea really what their values are. They've never had that conversation. It's really hard for them to understand that side of themselves. And so it really depends on the person. I find if I'm given a general age, I would say I would target 15, right? I think you can work younger. I think it takes a special kid to really be very self-aware, right? You got to have that metacognition, right? And so
Can you
I think
explain to those of us not in your field what
what
metacognition is?
meta
Yeah.
is the awareness of self, right? And that around you, how you're functioning within you and your environment, right? How they interact.
Okay.
And so understanding that relationship, how am I perceiving myself? How am I coming across? And being able to put words to it, man, that's a lot, right? That's a big ask. So I find that at 15, developmentally, that's pretty well set, and they might not be scholars at it, but they have an aptitude for it, right? They can do it, especially with some guidance. Um, 15 on up, but again, I find a lot of people that just don't have the skill set and really need to just start from even below ground zero, right? And just start to understand basic vocabulary of emotion words. What does it mean to be happy? What does that mean to be sad? Right? And they might have come in for, yeah, I'm not getting along with my sister. This is really impacting my life. How do I work through this? Well, if they can't understand how they're feeling, right, and identify that even just linguistically, then how are they supposed to remedy the relationship?
So you don't just work with teens, you work with like all ages, but probably no one younger than 13ish.
Yeah, I think, my sweet spot starts at about 15, and goes up. I say I work with, teens, young adults, parents of teens. It ends up I've had clients come about because they've come to me for their kid, and then we're actually working together instead of me with the kid, right? And we're working on issues that have to do really nothing directly with the kid, but of course can support, right, the relationship, right? So it's I'm a youth resilience coach, because that's kind of my sweet spot. But as I've moved on in this career, I found that this coaching up helps everybody, right? And I just want to be supportive as possible in this career.
So do parents usually come to you first? I imagine it's not because a kid wouldn't know, like, obviously I need resilience training, right?
Right.
It's more, I mean, and I don't know that I would know, right? What kind of problems or issues come up where a parent should say, okay, we're exploring options. Maybe resilience coaching is something I should think about. Like, what kind of, I don't know, things are these parents seeing in their kids' lives or the struggles that say, okay, maybe we need a little support.
Yeah. Yes. When it comes to, I would say, teens that are, in high school or even early college, or college level, yes, there's a lot of times it's the parent coming to me. They're finding me word of mouth, friends of friends, online, through websites. It's been all different ways. But yes, initially, a lot of times it's the parents. The older they get, I'm finding now that I've been doing some work within at different colleges here in the Denver metro area, that just to introduce people to what coaching is, and how coaching can help them. And the question is always, is this therapy? Right. And so we talk a lot about the differentials of those two things, how they can complement each other as well. And so some college students are finding me independently, right, through that. I think the older you are, the more you're going to look for services that might help you independently of a parent, right? But teens and young adults, yes, it's mostly through the parents.
Well, I'm thinking of some of colleagues, friends who have their kids are out of college, but are still. I mean, we read about that in the financial news. Like a lot of kids live at home. They're
Yep.
very, they don't want to leave the nest. They're very comfortable with their parents,
Sure.
and it's a failure to launch, which kind of has a bad connotation.
Yeah.
But is that something that you help with, or is that something that you
Sure.
see commonly?
Um, what I'm seeing from the kids that are about to graduate and who graduated last year, um, it's about 50-50. I mean, I'm seeing some kids have to move home because they just haven't found anything yet, but really want to move out. And some kids, yeah, want to stay home and make money, and then live at home because I can save it. And then have other goals like, oh, I want to buy an apartment or, a condo or something. And so I'm going to stay here for a few years and then move on. And some that just really have no drive or no real plan. And that's where the concern starts to be. If you have a plan,
Right.
that feels a lot better to the parent. If there's no plan, that's where things get a little tense and the parents start getting concerned, and right. So I see both. I see all of it.
And so let's like with that kid who has no plan, um, what, how do you help in that situation?
Well, first off, they have
Right,
to want to
right.
work, right? That you have to be um, coaching ready, right? You have to want to understand yourself, understand your predicament, and want forward motion. And so I have come into contact with obviously some parents who do want their kid to engage with me. And then you get on with the kid and, or the young adult, and they're not really interested, right? They're fine where they're at. And until they're ready to make a change and really understand, that they can make a change, there's no there's not really anything I can do to help. They really have to want to be part of the process. It's their process, right? It's not me doing it for them. They're the ones in the process, right? So,
I mean, that
it,
makes sense. It's
yeah,
like
it's like
anything, right? Yeah. I can't make you do things that are financially sound, and right,
right.
I can advise you and
Yes,
tell you the repercussions and pros and cons, but
you have to make your own
you
decision.
have to make your own decisions.
And so that's a place that I can insert then, and I offer my services to the parent then, right? What are you doing that doesn't fit you in relation to this child that's living in your home, right? And doesn't have any goals for himself or herself. And what are you comfortable with and what are you not? Let's identify those. What are your boundaries, right? There's work there that can be done, right? But again, they also have to want to change or right, modify some situation or look within.
Do you see it more commonly with, you know, male children, like with boys, like less who, no, it's kind of, it
I'm
doesn't
not.
matter.
I've got a pretty, 47, math's not good with me. So 47, 53. Is that right? Right? Something in that realm. It's pretty close, 50-50. I've got girls and boys on my caseload, women and men.
Okay. What, so what strategies, let's say the kid um, wants to figure things out. Like, can you give us examples of different strategies or guardrails that you set up for them?
Yeah. So let's take like an example of a client with ADHD, right? And the teen might come in and say, I've been identified as ADHD. I'm really struggling in school. I don't like science. I do like social studies, right? And I need help here. I don't need help here, right? And they think it's specific, right? But meanwhile, I can't get them to attend an appointment, right? So there's obviously some time management issue, right? Or something. So, we can talk about it's really about the why. So my direction and my guardrail, so to speak, the rails are questions I ask them. Why do you think you missed this appointment? What was it about that appointment? Did you get nervous? Was it and right and was it overwhelming? Was it right too much in the day? Did you just shut down? Were you exhausted physically? Were you and first and foremost, we got to identify that why. So a lot of my questions are tell me more. Why? Tell me more. Why? What have you done before? What do you think might work? And what holes could come and shoot up that plan, right? That you think of the strategy that might work. Let's think of the breakdown too. That might, we think this is a great strategy, but what if it isn't? And kind of doing some problem solving, right? And analysis around that. It's just me asking them questions so that they can sit and think and pause and hold in that space to really identify their reasoning and their actions.
And then you sort of note what you're going to try for the next week or
Yeah. And so then once they give me an answer, I was scared, right? I didn't know how this session would be. And I would say something like, okay, well, let's think of how we can make it not scary, right? Let's say you come in and I give you this well-being survey to do, but it's too much, right? You just don't want to do it on your own. What are some ways that would help alleviate that stress? Oh, well, I could do it. I could ask you if you would do it with me. Absolutely, let's do it together, right? And so then now we've moved over the hump of this work that they perceive as work and scary, right? To now a togetherness, right? We're gonna do this together. This isn't a big deal. This isn't homework, right? I'm just trying to help you identify things, right? So now, you know, now for the action item at the end of that session, I might say, so now getting you to the next session, what will make you feel not scared, right? To show up, right? And then we move through a couple strategies for it. And I say, pick one. And they'll pick one strategy. And I might even send them a text. I like to send my clients text. And remember, here's our appointment time. You were working on this strategy, right? And then hopefully, ideally, in an idyllic world, they come back and I say, did it work? And they say, yes, I'm here. Or no, that didn't work. My mom forced me into the chair, you know, something. And then
Yeah.
away we go again, right? To talk about it, understand their emotions, understand if they did make it and that strategy worked. Yay, awesome. Let's hold that one. Let's see where else we can apply it, right? Maybe we can apply it to science because you don't like science, walking through that door of science knowing you're going to feel overwhelmed, right? And it really is about identifying the emotion, being aware of the emotion, finding a strategy to get them past the negative emotion, right? And then putting it into place and seeing if it works. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. We'll come back and we'll find a new strategy.
So then let's get, how long do you typically work with these, I mean, younger clients?
So if they're teens, let's say in high school, you know, ideally it's gonna be a 4 to 6 month period, you know, at the low end. A lot of times once they get in, you know, they find that it really helps, right? And it just takes a bit to get going typically because they have to understand the process, right? Each session is about 45, 50 minutes with a check-in, setting the goal, coming up with some strategies, kind of working through that and the emotions of that, finding some holes in the strategies, problem solving again. Are we sure the strategy works? Yes, let's have an action item revolving around that strategy and off you go. And I'll see you next week, right? And once they get that process and they're not threatened by it and they're not scared of it, they tend to really like it. And they tend to start applying it to other places, right? So for those younger kids, I would say 4 to 6 months. Sometimes, you know, adults can go faster. Sometimes longer, right?
Right.
It really depends on the client. My goal is genuinely to not have you need me. My goal is to empower you to have those strategies to use and feel confident, not just for the one issue, but for however else it can be applied.
And how does that work when you're kind of, when they've really mastered or gotten really good at the skills? Like, what framework do you set up for them? Because I imagine, like, do you start tapering down on sessions, or do you have them make an appointment with themselves every week or however often
Um,
to
we
continue?
I could do a check-in in terms of how's it feeling? You know, these were your goals, right? I just did this last week with a girl. So hey, we've been working together for 8 months, and you know, these were your goals. I want to read them back to you, and I want you to kind of let's assess. I want you to assess how do you think you've done, right? Before you were feeling this was a goal. What are you feeling now, right? And we kind of do this just you know, based on some um, evidence. Look, you put this into motion with this, and this, right? That's evidence based, right? They get actual examples of how they've kind of cleared up the issue, right? Move forward. Sometimes that morphs into a different goal. Sometimes that goal moves over and we don't need to look at it again, right? And then they kind of assess, yeah, I think I'm good here, right? I think these are the three I wanted to do. I feel good. I have nothing else to work on. Great. You know, it's been awesome working with you. You always can come back. And the process kind of, you know, or maybe they want to set new goals because now something else has come up, totally unrelated, right? Um, it's it's variant per client.
And what about, let's, like the example that I was going through of these kids who are graduating and have had very little rejection, right? They've thrived at college, they thrived at high school, they were top of class, you know, sports athlete, very little rejection. And now they're coming into this world where it's very hard to get that first job.
Right. Right. And this sense of self that they've had, right, coming from maybe a community, right, that thinks of them in a certain way, and this, right, and then therefore their impression of themselves is one thing, and then they turn to the outer world, right? They've been in this educational bubble, right? The bubbles of college and home and high school, and now they're turning to the big scary world, and no one knows them there,
Yeah.
right? And how to apply that same confidence. How'd you get here to start? Let's use those skills to turn and project ourselves into the future, right? And really helping that kid also identify his skill set, his or her skill set, identify this isn't working. I'm trying this over and over and it's not working. Well, let's break it down. What do you think is missing, right? In the interaction that you're having in those interviews, or how are you sending out the resumes, or who are you networking with? We got to find those holes, right? And a lot of times it comes to I know I need to be doing this and I'm scared to do this. This is out of the box for me. I'm not good at this, right? Maybe it's reaching out to people you don't know,
Yeah,
right?
how can you help a 48-year-old with that?
Right?
It's
Exactly.
ingrained, right? It's
Right.
hard.
It's ingrained. It's very hard to move on past some, and when it's you're risking rejection,
Yeah.
right? We're all risking rejection. It's and yes, you might get rejected, right? And then to say on to the next, right? Understanding that didn't feel great, I didn't like it, but I'm going to persevere. Resilience, right? It really is about that one didn't work out. There will be a door. I'm going to change it up a little bit and see if this helps. And if that didn't help, we're going to change it up again and see if that helps, right?
Well, how do you coach them through when they're getting super discouraged?
Um, I really like to acknowledge this sucks. Like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't love, cheerleading them as much. I'm encouraging, but yeah, man, that sucks. I'm so sorry, right? And just meeting them where they're at. If they're discouraged, it's okay to be discouraged, right? It's you're not feeling because you feel discouraged. That was just the emotion you were having at that moment. But can we wake up tomorrow and maybe try something new, and maybe that makes us feel a little more hopeful, right? Is there just even an ounce, a shred, an ember of hope in a possibility of something, of doing something new, right? Can you feel it? Can you sit in that sense of something new? Maybe there's hope, and then can we move forward, right? It's okay to be discouraged, though. You got to let them feel that. It's not always going to work out.
Yeah, the concept of possibilities. I forget where I heard it on a podcast or read about it somewhere where it was just talking about even we as older adults, when we're in such a climate where it's very divisive, if we open ourselves up to more possibility and not kind of dive into our hole, that gives us more, that gives us some hope and
Yeah.
a little bit of oomph, right? A little bit
Yeah.
of pick me up.
Yeah, it's the hope goes a long way. Just a little tiny sliver of it goes a long way, right? It's the maybe. And why not try on the maybe, right? And there's the differential between someone who's really in dysfunction, who can't try on the maybe. That's a different subset, right? Versus people who are in function and are willing to try on the maybe, right? But you got to have the self-awareness, right? You got to be able to say, I'm not really comfortable there. And why am I not comfortable there? What happened in the past to make me not comfortable there? What do I want to change about that, right? Even just something as asking somebody for help. Hey, I'm going to buy your time here and ask you some questions, and you're probably going to think that these questions are stupid or silly, or right, we're so judgy on ourselves, right? We're so
Yeah.
so scared, and yet most times when you do push through that, people love to help, and then you find, oh, I don't know what I was so scared of, right? And you kind of, the more you do it, the better you get, right? And you're proving to yourself, what I thought isn't so, it's just what I thought.
And now, like let's kind of jump to the parents. So let's say like there's such a line, I mean, I think a thin line between enabling and support, right? How do you kind of figure that out when you're meeting with somebody? Or is it very clear? I don't know, right?
Because don't we all deal with that as parents?
Oh,
That is a
sure.
fine
Absolutely. That's why I'm
line.
asking.
So I'm just
Asking for a friend, not for
right,
myself.
right, right. It is a hard balance for each of us to empower and not do for, right? To suggest, plant a seed, and let the kid water it or not, right? It's the understanding that you can't, as the parent, your goal is what? Personally, I want my kids to be functioning adults, right? I don't want them relying on me. I want them off my bill. I want them out of my house. I want them right. As much as emotionally I don't. I love them. I love them here.
Yes.
But as functioning adults,
Right.
that's my hope for them. So is it best if I write their letter of or their college application essays for them? Right? Because they're too lazy or they don't know what to write or I'm a better writer, right? Is that going to help, right? Or maybe they're going to do it and maybe they won't get into that college, right? This that we're aiming for. But they did it on their own and they got into some other college and they're feeling really confident that they were in charge of their process. It's these are the fine lines that we're all walking through, right? So when I work with a parent, I really have to understand that parent's values. I have to understand that parent's goal for the child, and work within that framework.
That's got to be hard.
Sometimes it's right, but I'm not in a place I can sit in a place of, you know, it might not be what I do,
Right.
right? It might not be what you do, but it's what they're doing. And there's a million reasons why they think that's right.
Yeah.
And that's their choice. Again,
Right.
that's their choice. This whole process of coaching is me just empowering them to feel good and and find ways to help themselves and then help their child, right?
So, how do you work with other professionals? And I imagine some of your clients also have therapists or career coaches or college coaches. I mean, how does that? How do you fit into that circle, or do you even connect with them at all?
So, I have a couple clients that yes, that is helpful. Some of them work with therapists outside of me, which is a great combination to be in therapy and to have coaching at the same time. I think is a magnificent process. So as long as the client or the parent, depending on the age, give me permission and see value in it, right? Um, then it makes sense for me to connect to them. Sometimes there's not always value, right? Sometimes, and sometimes they don't want me to.
Yeah.
So it's I very, very much value my clients' privacy. And if I know they're working with somebody else, if I know that, right, even if it's a math tutor, right, something, even that math tutor understanding, hey, listen, this would be helpful information for them to have. Would you like to share that, or do you want me to share that? Do you want mom and dad to share it? Do you not want it to be shared? They have to empower these choices and decisions. But yes, that's always been something I'm capable of doing. I enjoy doing. But first and foremost, their privacy is of the utmost concern. So it's up to that client.
Yeah, I mean they're teens. I imagine they don't want a lot of their business out there, especially if
Yeah,
it's different than their
yeah.
friends.
And they have to come into the process trusting me that what they say is between us. And I always say to the parents and to them, under 18 especially, right? What you share here is kept private, right? This is between you and I. Unless there's something that, you've said to me that, you're going to hurt yourself or others, right? Something of that nature. Then by law, by certification, right? I'm bound to get help, right? And share that information. But other than that, it's a very private process. And I value that first and foremost, and I like to make sure they really understand that. This has to be a safe space, or they're not going to really be honest and do the work.
So tell me about the accreditations that you have to become a coach, a certified coach, and what should people look for if they're not able to work with you for whatever reason?
Um, I think, well, so I have a accreditation through the International Coaching Federation. There's different levels of coaches depending on how long, how many classes you've taken. Um, I have my career has been long-standing in that I've worked with. I'm a speech pathologist and accredited through American Speech Hearing Association, um, and coupled with this coaching certificate. Um, I've kind of blended the two together, right? So that's kind of my area of specialty, communication, right? And the dysfunction of with this kind of understanding of self, setting goals, and forward motion, right? And so there's lots of different accreditations. There's lots of different places somebody can get a coaching certificate. I went through ICF because it was the gold standard. Um, so you can become certified in all sorts of areas as a coach. You can become certified very specifically in something like where they just work with clients that have ADHD, health and wellness, um, people who are wanting more career and job things, youth, right? Different age ranges. So it can be very specific and it can be very general. Um, so if you can't work with me, um, you really need to just, yes, look at their accreditation. I would then look to see whatever their accreditation is, go and read on that website and see what they had to do in order to get their accreditation, right? How much training it was, what they, the level that they had to work at. But once you do that, most importantly, it's meeting the coach, right? You gotta be comfortable with that person. You have to feel like they hear you, they understand you, um, that they're empathetic um, and that they are caring, right? And they have your best interests at heart.
Do you have free resources or books or websites that you recommend for people to go to
Um,
learn more?
about coaching in general.
Just about
Or
the resilience coaching and training, or if somebody wanted to read on maybe how to do that for themselves, are there places that they can start?
Yeah. So, Youth Coaching Institute was where I got trained. And I chose them because to me, they were gold standard because they are evidence based. So, meaning everything that I was taught had data behind it. So, I'm a scientist, I'm a speech pathologist. Everything I did was had data, studies. That was my whole training, right? Um, and I worked in medical fields and educational fields for 25 years. So to me, it was important to have a backing of data and proof and evidence to support what I was going to be practicing. And YCI had that. And so the training I got has evidence to support how I'm going to coach you, right? So that's youthcoachinginstitute.com. Um, you can read up about the International Coaching Federation. Just Google that if you want to learn more about the general coaching and what they're requiring. Um, and then resources, in terms of, I came to, I asked a lot of coaches before I chose the program. I went through about, I would say 15 people that I knew that were coaches that I had connected to. Just, I researched them through LinkedIn. And that was kind of how I refined the program that I wanted to use, right? So if it's for them and they're interested in a career choice like that, that's what I would recommend. Just start asking around, right? And doing your research.
Well, I'm
Um,
I'm thinking more of the people. I'm glad you talked about the
okay.
science base. I mean, I'm thinking more of the folks who are like, this sounds a little woo woo to
Yeah.
me, right? Like but there's real science and data that shows that this is effective. It does help people. Um, and that, I mean, I guess I think I'm wondering for people who can't afford to hire a coach, or for people who just aren't quite ready to take that first step,
Yeah,
sometimes learning about how to do it for themselves.
yeah,
And maybe they end up needing a coach later, but at least they could understand some of the framework on their
sure.
own if there's good places to start.
So I do have a book that I personally use for some activities and stuff for some of the kids that I work with, some of the young adults that I work with as well. And it's called Your Life, Your Way. And it's by Joseph Ciarocci and Louise Hayes. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm going to show it up here for your YouTube part. I think
Okay.
the
Okay.
glares maybe.
And I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, good. And it's great because it walks you through the coaching process. But basically what it's doing is it's helping you with self-reflection and self-awareness. And there's activities in here and they're you can do a page or two at a time. It walks you through a specific process in order. So it feels linear, it feels progressive in nature, and it's not threatening. There's, it's some of the activities are even like, check the boxes, right? Give a list of five. Connect the dots. I mean, they're real basic activities that just to start to help some of that thinking come on that meta level that we talked about earlier. It's really important to have that, right? And if you can just even using a guide like this, if that's how you want to start, go for it, please. Right?
Yeah.
Great resource.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about when it comes to resilience coaching and Treppy coaching and how that works?
Um, you know, I think I'd just like people to, if you walk away with anything from listening, I think, you know, look around. There's a lot of people struggling out there.
Yeah.
Most are silent. Most don't say that they're having trouble. Most don't talk about it. And check in with people. I just, more so than plugging anything that I do, or I just want people to be aware, right? And just, try to try to have compassion as you go through your day. And you meet up with hundreds of people a day. You come across hundreds of people a day in the grocery store, at a stoplight, in a class, a friend at coffee. Check in with people, understand people are going through a lot, things you don't know, things you don't understand. Give grace.
I think that's lovely. I think that would make the world a much nicer place
Right.
for
And we all
everyone
need to
and for
practice
yourself.
it. I'm not perfect at it either. We all need to practice it, right? So,
Well, you know that I love understanding how other people do these things in their life. I would imagine what you do, it's hard not to take on the burdens of some of your clients. How do you personally maintain your own balance and your own peace?
yeah,
Because I think in a job that you requires empathy,
yeah,
um, it probably makes you really good at your job, right? But also must be hard to sometimes not let that bleed into your own
yeah,
life, your
yeah.
own personal life. What do you do to maintain that kind of separation or maintain your peace?
Um, it's a little bit like a muscle in that when I first started, it impacted me a lot, right? The people that I was servicing, I care about my clients, right? I have empathy towards my clients, I take notes throughout the session, and when I'm done with the session, I close out and I rewrite the notes. And for me, it just kind of closes it up. I don't know why I can't. There's something about the writing and rereading and reprocessing in my brain and my central nervous system that there's a start of the session, there's a middle, and there's an end. And when I can see it, right, and reread it, it closes it out for me, and I can put it in the folder and move on. Um, I have my own processes like that, and I think about my clients a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, I
It's hard
think
not
about
to
them.
in our like
It
types in our
really
work. We're
is.
so in their lives. I say
It,
they're part of my now worries,
yeah,
right? Like they come up
yeah,
at different parts of the day where I'm like, oh,
yeah.
I wonder, or I
And
hope this is going okay, or blah blah blah.
yes, yes, and I find myself honestly checking in sometimes. How's the week going? You know, little things here and there, but not too much because they're on their own. I have to trust that they're on their own. They can do it, right? Sometimes when I know they're in a tougher situation, I give a little check in, right? But I am learning too as I grow as a coach, right? Some other strategies that work for me. I have had a therapist and I've been in therapy myself since I was 18, 19. So to me, um, having a coach and someone to um, help support me in my endeavors and learn about myself has helped me tremendously understand where I was, where I am, where I want to be, and that that process, knowing that I'm going along that continuum as well, right? Is I'm hoping dripping down into the sessions that I'm doing, and then making sure there's a boundary between right my professional and my personal life.
Yeah, well, that's important. It's hard to though sometimes,
It's
right?
really hard.
And what hobbies or interests do you have outside of work? I'm always looking for ideas for my clients who are going to retire, for myself eventually in retirement, because there's so many of us that we're so busy with our lives now that we don't really have hobbies or interests that other than work and our families and our friends, right? It's hard to. And
What time
as
is it?
women, we feel guilty, right? We feel guilty spending money on something that doesn't seem like it has a purpose, right?
I have come a long way in that.
That's good.
And I empathize with that. I think when my firstborn is now a sophomore in college, and when he was even leading up to when he was launching, that was a really hard time understanding, wow, he's headed out. And not that he didn't need me, but I wanted him to launch and I wanted he needed to detach, right? And go live his life. It really questioned well, what is my role? What am I doing? And now I have more free time, right? And do I want to take on more clients? How does that, what services me? Um, and this year, I don't really create like New Year's, what are they called? Resolutions.
Yeah.
But this year, for some reason, I said, I'm just going to say yes. That was it. I didn't say what to. I didn't say why or how. It was very simple. I'm going to say yes. And so anything that has come in my way, apart from something dangerous or too expensive, I have said yes. So I just thought I'd try that, and it has led me to back to art. To be honest with you, which is something that I love, and I used to paint, and then it's messy and it's annoying and I would never pick it up, and I have this canvas sitting there and with the paints ready and I never picked it up. And then I tried something different. I tried a graphite and a colored pencils class, and I am falling in love with colored pencil. And so I am feeling in my life now. My oldest is away. My youngest is a junior in high school. He's taken the reins of his responsibilities most times. Um, so I'm finding myself with a lot of time, and as my client list grows, I want that balance of work and this new energy, artistic energy, and I'm really drawn to it. And that's where I'm starting to spend a lot more time, just kind of in that artist mindset, and it's very meditative for me. It's very calming. My central nervous system calms, and um, I
Do you have
love
to
it.
schedule it for yourself? How does that work?
It's been hard because, well, they're
Yeah,
offered when they're offered, right? And then
right.
that's the other thing because I'm really committed. I like to exercise. That's my other, right, like kind of release. And so I know I'm going to do that in the morning, and that's kind of always been my thing. But all of a sudden this class was in the morning, and now I was having to give up, right, one thing for the next in this trade-off. And I found that it wasn't really much of a trade-off,
Yeah.
right? That I was such a stickler on the when, but kind of putting this in, finding I could put this in and do this thing, right, later or a different time. It was an adjustment for me, right? Being flexible with myself, right? And giving myself permission to do it.
Those are all good lessons for me.
It's been a ride. So
Well,
yeah.
thank you for sharing. What's
Thank
the
you.
best way for people to find you?
So you can visit the site www.treppycoaching.com, or you can email me, Jennifer at Treppy, TREPPIE.com. And those are the best ways. You can look at
Okay.
I'm on Instagram, Facebook under Treppy Coaching. Um, and I would love to connect, answer any questions people have.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This was
Thank
so
you.
fun.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.